in town. I thought maybe after this I would go over. Except that'll probably be the noon hour.
Are you putting that on Facebook?
I'll put it on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'll share that link on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's 11 o'clock. I'm trying to be cognizant of your time because I know some of you might be on lunch break. Today is our community chat. I'm so excited to have Peter Osborne here. He's the director of the Robert Henri Museum and Art Gallery. And he is going to be talking about the new Robert Henri Art Gallery that is currently being built. It is being recorded, so we'll put that up on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll share the link on Facebook under the library site. We just kind of chat, so.
Oh, I
Peter's kind of doing a presentation.
Is that
Yes,
okay?
absolutely. We
Okay.
do this differently every time. So I'm asking you ahead of time, if people have questions, do you want them to stop?
Anytime, just
stop
raise your
and ask
hand
questions?
and go from there. For
Okay.
Sure. Yes.
The other thing is, if you would please sign in, if you haven't done so already, you can do that at the end. I'm gonna mention that next month is March, and we are going to have the Hainers from Camp Kamika come and talk about all the things they're doing. So we hope you can join us again. And this is Peter.
All right, here, Lori, you probably want to. Okay. Well, thank you, Lori, for having me. It's great to have those of you who are here who do not know about the gallery, what's happening. We're glad to be able to tell you about it. So I'm, as Lori said, the director of the museum, but also am a professional historian and have been for 40-some years now. And I want to just offer some context about this, my little presentation. Then, of course, you can ask any questions if you want. So more than half of the books I've written have been institutional histories. And most of them have talked about, for example, a history of like the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, and I wrote an institutional history of that. I wrote institutional histories of the parks, the two state parks where Washington crossed the Delaware. One on another nature preserve, one on four on the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, FDR's time. So I, as a historian, have long been interested in institutional history. It's not the only part of history I'm interested in, but it's one of the things I've written the most about. And so I'm fascinated by how institutions develop sometimes, and I also am interested in leadership. Sometimes organizations have a good leader for 10 years, sometimes they have a bad leader for 5 years, a leader gets fired, whatever. Some have money, some don't have money. Some have boards that are supportive of what's going on, some have divisive boards. And oftentimes there are events beyond an institution's control that have major impacts. So I remember writing a few years ago a book about where Washington crossing parks are in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And in that case, both of those parks were, I would say, almost damaged by state funding issues. And in one case in 2009, the state of Pennsylvania cut its history departments back by half. And that changed radically what those parks couldn't do. They had to lay people off. So that's the kind of thing that I'm interested in as a historian. And this is what I'm going to review, what say to you today is kind of along these lines. It's an institutional history of our museum and art gallery. So you'll understand why this is so significant, what we're doing right now here in our community. So I gave you a little handout here with pictures, which we'll go through. Also a copy of our fundraising brochure in case you're interested in donating. And then lastly, a new Art on the 100th Meridian booklet that was printed by and created by the Cozad 150, of which Lori was the president, chairman, director, whatever she was, I don't know. Okay, so if you go to the first page on the inside, our museum was founded in the early 1980s to preserve the boyhood home of Robert Henri, and in particular his family, the Cozad family. It should also be known that it was not until 1955 that it was even known that Robert Henri had an association with Nebraska, had lived here during his teenage years, until it was revealed in a history of John Sloan, who was one of Henri's best friends. This is the top picture is what our building looked like when we started. There were branches, pieces of the stucco were coming off, needed a new roof, new porch. The inside was in really tough shape. And to restore that building, as I look back on it now, it was a really remarkable accomplishment. And Marlene was one of the people that was there at the time, at least. And most of those folks, those founders, are gone now. It's just, that's the nature of the business 40 some years ago. The bottom picture is of work being done. Marlene, I think that's the gallery, the current.
I was trying to figure that out.
I think that's where this is. You're looking back towards the Miles Marriott room. I
Okay,
think in that picture.
okay.
Anyway, what happened is the walls had to be stripped, ceilings had to be taken down, and these are two of the volunteers who were helping to do that. But this happened across the entire building. There was no central heating system, no security systems, all the windows and doors were replaced. It was really a monumental accomplishment that was done solely by volunteers. There were no directors at that time, and they were led by Shirley Paulson. And Shirley plays a very significant role in this, and as you will see, her family followed. We opened our building in 1985, 86, after those renovations were completed. And at the time when we opened, we only owned prints of Robert Henri and no original paintings. And so they were trying to tell the story of the house, the Cozad history, the being a hotel, having prints of Robert Henri, trying to tell that story. And as I had said, there was so little known because that had only come to knowledge in 1955. Mary Sandoz wrote her book about the gambling man, or the son of the gambling man. That had only come out in 1960, so there was not that much knowledge out there about this background. And then if you go over to the next page, there's a picture of what our building looked like just as they were coming to the end of the restoration. And it is a building that was built in 1878, 79, made of local brick. And you can see the brick there in that picture on the second floor, and then it was stuccoed over in the 19-teens and then restuccoed in the time that the museum took the building over, purchased the building. The building had been purchased from the Cozad Historical Society, which had purchased it from Randall May, who had been a real estate developer here in town.
Were those made with Cozad bricks?
Yes. So the next time you're out at the cemetery, Cozad Cemetery, and if you're standing looking into the cemetery, off to the left, so that would be the northwest, there's a very slight, it's hard to see it, but there's a slight dip in the ground. And that's where the clay came from. Now that field, I was talking to Jim Hart about it, that field has been somewhat altered by farming and they brought some dirt in, but there's still the dip there. And that's where Traeger Gate got the brick to build those, to build not only this building, but others here in Cozad as well. One of the problems with this brick in our building and others is that it's very soft. In fact, if you get one of the softer pieces, you could almost push a pencil right through it. They did not have the ability to fire it at the high temperature like our building is here. And so what happened with that brick is it absorbed moisture. It was like a sponge. And that leads us to the next picture down because there were no gutters on the building. So all the water was coursing off the roof and hitting the ground at the foundation. And these bricks, because they're so soft and porous, were just absorbing the water. So this whole end of the building, ultimately in 2006, had to be replaced because all that brick was just crumbling. It was almost like dust at that point and across the front of the building as well. But that happened largely because this water is coming off the top of the building and hitting right there at the foundation. So in those early years after we took the building over, our programs and tours focused on the Cozad family, the shooting of Al Pearson, the building served initially as a hotel until the early 1900s, and it became a boarding house. It's even believed, and I can't prove this, although I think I know when it happened, it was even a house of ill repute, or at least the second floor was. And I do think that happened between 1910 and 1920. I've also had a person there who, she's not a psychic, but she's a prominent member of our community, but she believes, and she was sitting one day and she said to me, I'm telling you that in the room above us on June 4th, 1904, there was a terrible fight about what was going to happen with this building. And I can't pin that date at all on anything, although I know it's right after that, a few years after that, that the building, the Stephen Henri, who owned the building at that point, died and was sent off to another family, also from the same town in Illinois where Henri was from, and that period, 1910, 1920, is when there was a lot of activity going on there on the second floor. So anyway, but in the early decades of our museum's history, from the 80s until the 2000s, we focused on this building and the church and school that we owned in the Pony Express station, and you were given tours of all 4 buildings at that point. It's also worth saying that at that time we also had 2 volunteers in the morning, 2 volunteers in the afternoon, and we had a whole group of people that were a part of part of our organization, and that is long gone. And they were World War II generation and Korean War generation, and most of those folks are gone now. So now we're struggling, as are most not-for-profits in the whole country, from a lack of volunteers. Okay, if you go, so the building in 2006, that whole western end was taken down, replaced. The front end was also taken down and replaced. And if you're young enough to remember that, or can remember it, you could look into the whole front of the building. I mean, all the rooms were open. You could just see right in. And then our whole museum was moved down the street for that time that this work was being done. We have had no major catastrophe since then, and everything seems to have held well. Larry Kari, who did this work, told me that the building at this end, this western end, had in some places was down 6 inches. The floor was out of whack that much. So it was a major effort to do this, but it was done. And we have had really no significant problems since then. We've had other minor things. I think when you own an old building, you're always going to have those things happen to you, but we've had nothing major since then, hopefully. The next page is what the building looks like today. And we continue to put money into it. We put a new HVAC system in the upstairs last year. That was almost $15,000. We did put new gutters on, so now the water gets away from the building. And so we continue on with this effort to maintain this building, and it retains its significance. It's on the National Register of the Historic Places. So in the years that have passed since the mid-1980s, we since have either acquired or borrowed 17 Robert Henri paintings, and that's what's on display right now. We have 2 or 3 paintings that are controversial in terms of their provenance, and a number of them are on loan to us, and we have 40+ sketches. So that part of the story is important for the next chapter. And until now, you'll see on the next page, in 2014, the museum built a new gallery to the north of where we are now. And these are pictures of the construction of it. You can see the grass was stripped off, there was a foundation put down. And just one of those curious kinds of things, the way, the style of the construction is very similar to what we're doing right now. Those are white styrofoam blocks, and the concrete is poured in between the 2 different sides of it. And Larry Kari built this building for us. And then this is what the building looks like today. And so since that time, 2014, we've acquired these paintings and sketches, but at this point we're full. we could take another painting or two, but if somebody offers us 5 paintings, we would be hard pressed because there's just no more wall space left in the gallery. Which brings us to the next page, which is the beginning of our current project. So in 2019, so that's almost 4 years ago, we began discussing building a new gallery. And there were a series of conversations about this. How do we pay for it? What would it look like? Where would it go? And then about 2.5 years ago, Larry Paulson came to me and said, I want you to consider what the various options are to build a new building. So we looked at doubling the size of our current gallery and just extending it right off the back. We looked at purchasing the bank building that's on the corner, that was Royal Security Bank. Then we talked about renovating the former American Legion building that was built in 1949, or simply tearing that building down and building a new building in its place. We laid out all the options, what the costs were, what the good points or bad points were. And Larry, I think, really had always wanted to build a new building, but I think he wanted to be sure that we had thought it through. So we did, and it was decided to demolish the American Legion building, which Larry owned, or Paulson Inc. owned, and it was resolved to tear that building down and put up a new building. We had considered restoring or renovating that building, but there was so many problems with that building. I mean, some of which you would not have seen necessarily, but there were so many problems that we would have still had a 1949 building that had been repaired. That's what it was. So on November 1st of last year, we began the construction of a new gallery. This is all of our board of directors standing there. I think that's most of them, or all of them, yep. And started this process of demolishing the building and beginning to build a new building. And then if you flip over to the next page, the project has gone on smoothly since. The foundation was laid, and now the walls are going up. And in fact, the picture I have below is a little dated, but the walls are almost another 3 feet. They'll be the height that they're going to be in the final structure. They're also using these styrofoam blocks, and just to describe them, they're tied together, linked together, and then you put rebar in them, and then you just dump concrete into that, and that all gets held together. There are straps that hold everything together, and it was very interesting to me because after they poured this a couple of weeks ago, the walls were still warm from the concrete curing. You could still feel the warmth through this styrofoam. The reason that we're using styrofoam is it's a very good insulating factor. And so one of the challenges is when you have all these various contractors working on this kind of project, the electrical guys wanted to dig channels into the styrofoam to lay their wires, the electrical wires. And Shane Shute, who is the project manager, said, you can't do that because that'll cut into the insulation factor of this. So if you see blue tubes coming out the top or out the sides, that's where they're going to run the lines through. The roof on the building is going to be such that you won't see it from the ground. The walls will be high enough and it sits. So actually the height right now that it is where the roof will be. And then there's these walls that go up on each side around it. All right, so then on the next page, this is what the building is going to look like when it's complete. There on the left. And right now, if you drive by there, you'll see the arches there, or the arch for the center is laid out. And when they pour the concrete on Thursday for the next round, you'll be able to see that archway more clearly than now. So then that's what the building will look like from the outside. There's no windows on the east or west end, and there's just a door on the back end that will lead out onto a patio, as it's described here, a courtyard. And so that was purposely done because that'll be less natural light coming in, and that could impact on the paintings. So just some features of the new building that you'll see. There'll be a parking lot out front for 6 cars, some trees planted. Our gift shop will move from the old museum, from the current museum over to the new gallery. My office is going to be a little bit bigger than shown here. Then there'll be a gallery in the center there with exhibit dividers, and things will be hung on the walls. There's a storage room there, there's a mechanical room, and also a kitchen, so if we decide to do events, we can do that. Then an area where we could have a serving area. All those exhibit panels that you're seeing there are going to be on wheels, so that they can be moved around if we decide to change our exhibits. And then a men's room, a ladies' room, and then another entry out from there. It's going towards the historic walkway and coming back to our building. So this will probably expand our exhibit space by about 4 times. The building is 5 times bigger than our building currently is. And so we're going to be able to do a lot more now there. And also, if we decide to do a nice event outside, we'll have the courtyard between the current gallery and the new gallery. So the next page, we're now currently designing our exhibits and how the museum, the new gallery building, I should say, is going to operate. For those of you who met Jess Sharkey, our Irish intern from last year, she's working on this with me. She's coming back here in September to help build the exhibits. So right now we're planning the exhibitions, deciding how many panels we want, and then probably in the fall of maybe September, October, we're going to open a building and have exhibits there. Right now, our exhibits are designed there's a portrait section, there's a landscape section, and sketches section. We're designing these exhibits to be different and to be designed by geography. So all of our Spanish paintings and sketches will be in one place. The Irish paintings and sketches will be in another. And as I mentioned, the panels will be movable. So if we should get more paintings, have to redesign something, we can do that. In addition, we're going to have display kiosks. So when you come in, our scheduled events for not only that day, but the future will be there on one of those. And then another kiosk will have all the donors, all the volunteers, board members, and a special acknowledgement to Tammy and Larry Paulson. The building is going to cost roughly between $3 and $4 million. We are hoping to create an endowment of $1 million to be able to support the operation of the building every year. And the most significant contribution, obviously, is by Tammy and Larry Paulson. They have committed to $2 million for the project. We have received the Shovel Ready grant that was part of the federal, it was a federal program, and we got one of those. And we're applying for other monies as well. So we hope to hear back about that money. And there have been other people. I mean, we've raised about $230,000 for the endowment. And many people have given us monies, whether it be $5 or $15,000, or even one donor has given us $65,000. So, but every donation counts, whether it be $5, $1, up to whatever. As I said, we're hoping to open this in the fall of this year. We're saying September, October, but weather plays a factor in this. I know that the roof members, they're not coming in until March, so you can just see where all those things get pushing things back. Some of the things that we have to order for the displays, we want to try to get these grants soon so we can order those things so that they're supply chain things we can do that. And then lastly, one of the things that strikes me about this whole project is how important it's going to be for our community. I mean, it's a really big deal, and I'm not sure that, and it's hard to tell because the building's going up, but having been involved with it now for 3 years, I am absolutely certain this is a game changer for Cozad. It's going to bring people here, as our museum does now, from all over the country, but I think it's going to bring even more people here. And we're getting phone calls from people, maybe wanting to donate. We had a phone call from a woman yesterday, and she was just trying to get a value of a painting, older woman, and we can't give appraisals. But I did say to her, if you want to give your painting away, we got room for it. So, and we had another woman call us with a color pastel sketch, and she's interested in donating that to us. So I think that what's going to happen when this building is up and running, it's going to be climate controlled, secure, security system. It's going to attract more people and more donations to us. And I really believe that in a very short order, we're going to have the largest collection, a national collection of national significance. There are places that have one or two of his paintings right now, but nobody has even 17. But we're going to borrow 5 from almost an hour to 22, and I'm sure that more are going to come in as this goes along. Another reflection I've always thought is I've been amazed at how generous people have been to this project. Time, money, effort, design, it's pretty remarkable. I live in Red Cloud, which is, of course, a little Catholic country, and the Catholic Foundation has had the same thing happen, except for a lot longer than us here. But the donors have been just remarkable, the money that they've given to us and what we're trying to accomplish. Just a couple of other things. One of the things that Jess and I are working on is an operational plan for the gallery. Because now you can imagine, well, 3 buildings. And so one of the things that is going to happen is that the center of our operations are going to move from the museum building over to the gallery. So the gift shop, my office, of course, all the paintings, and it will actually make it much better for us because right now, if you come and want to see our paintings, you've got to go to the museum, then go to the gallery. Now all that will be in one place. That is not to say that the museum is going to go silently into the night. The museum is going to remain a critical part of our operations. We have in the budget, for example, walkie-talkies for our volunteers, so that if they're at the gallery, need to go to the museum and something happens or they need us, we can do that. So the museum will definitely remain the focus of our tours. One of the things that we have found over my 5 years here is that maybe 75% of our visitors are coming off the interstate. They're interested in the paintings only. They're not interested in his family's history or that. Maybe a little bit, but not enough to say want to spend an hour or two at the museum. They just want to go to the gallery. A lot of people just walk in and just say, just want to see the gallery. But the flip side of that is local people have just the opposite feelings. They want to see the museum, and the gallery's nice, but it's the museum they want to see. So the museum will continue to be the focus of what we're doing. It's not going away. We're not going to shutter it. We've spent really probably more than $100,000 in my time here putting new HVAC systems in, building exhibits. We have a new book out now. All of that has focused on the museum and will remain so. One of the things that we're talking about that we really haven't discussed with our board yet is changes in staffing, because I think ultimately, as much as we depend on volunteers and are grateful, I think we're going to have a second person on staff. I just don't see how this works with just one person, 3 buildings. And so that's an issue that still has to be resolved, but it's something that we're kind of going to put in this plan that the board ultimately is going to have to say, we have to hire somebody second here. Because then otherwise what will happen is you'll come to the gallery and now we'll have to close the gallery, go over to the museum or go back, which is what we're doing right now if there's not more than one person there. And then lastly, when we first met with the architects a year and a half ago, and we were walking the property, they said, oh, can we tear the gallery down, the current gallery? And I said, you don't understand. I said, if you tear that building down, I'm going to get lynched from a tree here in Cozad. Marlene will never come back to Cozad ever again. So no, you can't tear it down. You got to work around it, whatever you're going to do. And so the current gallery will be used for our archives and also for our library. And there's even been discussion about having temporary exhibits or artwork. So that would add another exhibit space for us. So, but we know we're going to put the archives in the library. It's going to be controlled and secure. It would work for all those reasons. All right, I think that's about everything I have to say, but I would be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Well, one of my questions is actually maybe more for Marlene.
Oh, good.
So I heard you say that after the big renovation project, the building opened in 85, 86. But I do know that the Pink Pinafore painting by Robert Henri, along with the portraits of the family, were at the Elks Club, and I want to say in 1984. Was that like a fundraiser? Was that set up as a fundraiser to help pay for the renovations, do you know?
That I don't know.
Well, there was also a Miles Marriott show.
Yeah.
That did raise money, because that one did. I think that was like a temporary, correct me if I'm wrong, Marlene, but I think that was a temporary show more than anything. And we're just at the very beginning of discussions about getting all 4 of those paintings back. That's a Henri self-portrait, his mother, his dad, and his brother, which are all at the Sheldon over in Lincoln, seeing if we can't get them into this new gallery, at least for the first year of the opening. One of the problems is that Sheldon wants $1,500 to borrow a painting. They got you, you just have no choice. So there would be, $5,000 to $6,000 that we would have to pay to borrow it for a year. Now, that's what they say as their policy on their website. And maybe we could, maybe what they would do us a favor or whatever that might be. So Mona has not charged us for anything. So
That was my next question, is I heard you say that you're going to borrow 5
Yes.
paintings, but
4 of
can you
them
say
are-
which ones they are?
There's 2 of them from France. I think one of them is Linda Craig, who's his first wife, and there's one other landscape scene, which is really good because we have as many portraits, and I'd love to get more landscapes because he's known as a portrait painter, but he was a terrific landscape painter. 4 of those we can bring back in Chuck's car. The one there, Linda, is a full-length portrait. I mean, it's 7 feet tall, 3 feet, unless you can put that in your car or tie it on the roof, maybe.
I don't think Mona would appreciate it.
But the last time.
We borrowed a painting from Mona a few years ago when Mariana was on tour. And that's what we did. We went down in my car and got the painting. And it, was about like this, and then Jane Roman, who owned the painting, deaccessioned it from Mona because and it hadn't been on display. A long time ago, if ever. And so she donated that painting to us. And it's a landscape, it's in the gallery today. And so we transport that twice to Mona.
Just to tell you, Mona is unusual in that regard. I mean, the Sheldon's going to put it on a truck, 3 armed guards, the whole thing, and bring it over. So when we borrowed this painting from Mona, the Museum of Nebraska, I'm sorry, I keep saying Mona, is over in Kearney. So the first time we borrowed the painting, I asked Chuck if he would go and get it, and he said he would. And Marlene said to me, "You ought to go too. You're the director." And I wasn't going to go. Well, when Marlene speaks, that's the way it is. Us mere mortals have to. So anyway, I said, okay, I would go. And then on the morning of, Marlene said, "I want to go." And so we all went over, and it was like Chuck said, in a cardboard box. And as we were driving over and then back, especially, I was thinking, it was a really good thing that we had Marlene here. Because Marlene knows everybody. And if somebody had tried to take us hostage or kidnap us or take the painting, I feel absolutely certain that Marlene would have said, "I know your father, and I'm going to go home tonight and call him about you." So we got the painting back and forth twice safely. So anyhow, but I don't think the Sheldon is going to do that. And so they have a new director, Jane Bellamy Roman is, I think, going to talk to the new director and see if we can't borrow those, because that would be great if we could have all 4 of those at the beginning of the show. And just to let you all know how it works, when you borrow paintings, you have to give what's called a site facility plan to that institution. And it has to show it's secure, that there's climate control, that the lighting is going to be, there's all these criteria. I'm sure that our new building is going to have all those, but we don't have a report written yet. But the old building, the current gallery, has made the cut every time we've tried to do this. So it just is a matter, and we're writing a grant proposal now, and I'm going to see maybe just putting that money into the proposal and just see if somebody else would pay for it, because that's a lot of cash, as you can imagine, $5,000. But that's, I think that answers your question. I hope it does.
So, what would you like to get out? What message would you like to get out, since you're gonna be on the internet here, as far as fundraising goes?
Well, we certainly are aiming to get $1 million towards our endowment. 5,000 a year, right? Or 50,000 a year, right, John?
Yeah, hopefully it should be.
Yeah.
50, 55, depending on what rates are.
And that would pay the light bill, the insurance. That's all going to go into a restricted account. We can't use it for anything. It would just be the income from it. So that would be one thing. And that people could support us and help us. And if it's $5, $500, that whatever that amount is, we will gladly accept. The second thing I would say, because this will be on the internet, who knows who will listen to it, we'd love to get more handwriting paintings. And, you know, we prefer to own them than to borrow them, but we do have some on loan from the Paulsons. But that would be the other thing. And then lastly, to get people here, because it's a great, between the new building, our old building, and then the current museum, it's a great way to spend a couple hours. And of course, all the business that might go downtown to people, the quilt shop, the restaurants, bistro next to us, whatever. I think it has those three economic benefits. Yeah.
So would you explain, you know, our demographic who visited us,
Yes.
you know, and their income
Yeah.
sources?
So I would say, generally speaking, it's 50 and above, 50 to 80. And I would say they are tended to be upper income people. Folks, that's not to say that Peter Osborne can't go there, because I'm not in that upper income bracket, but I would go there for sure. And I think that that is our basic group. And I would say that there's also people interested in the history of the building and the history of the Cozad family. We get a fair number of Cozads here every year. They're always very proud, although they're only very distantly related to Robert Henri. And they'll come and say, oh, I'm related to Robert Henri. And they are. They're like a second cousin, once removed, whatever. But I mean, we do. Yeah, but they have the name. And one of the people who's very active at the museum with us is Andy Cozad. And Andy is from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. He was here for 2 weeks last summer. He's coming back for the opening. So there are many people on different levels. We've had 2 people last year that were from Cozaddale, Ohio, that wanted to see what the town was like in Cozad, Nebraska. And that was kind of fun. And one of the guys sent me a t-shirt. It was too small, but he sent me a t-shirt afterwards from the Cozaddale hardware store. So there's a broad attraction of people. And if you look at our visitation records, you're looking at New York, Chicago, Denver, and California, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Those are some of our biggest. And we had 5 or 6 countries represented last year in our visitation. I think we had almost 3,000 people physically come through the doors or participate in the program. We had 26,000 people come in some way, shape, or form to our Facebook page. And I think it was 12 or 13,000 to our webpage. So I mean, we have this broad reach, and this is only going to add to that, I think, to that dimension. So, yeah.
So the current gallery, you said, was going to turn into an archive. Are there any plans to digitize what you have? And
Come on, Lori,
what
this is
do
hard
you
enough.
have? You know me, I ask the
No, I
hard
know.
questions. And what do you have? Like, I'm guessing like art scholars would be interested, historical research.
We've had 2 there. Brittany Strupp was here a couple of years ago, a scholar from the Smithsonian Art Institute. We have this kind of curious, it's a smaller collection of Apple Island things. His pipe bill, when he bought pipe and tobacco in Ireland, his train ticket. But we also have other things related to the Cozads more than anything. We have a digitized copy of his 1880 diary. The original is now at the Sheldon. But that's the most, singularly, the most important document that we own, because that's of the time that the Cozads actually lived in that house, in the building, and before John's troubles. And Robert is pretty descriptive of what he's seeing about a county fair, or he had a local, he wrote a local editorial in the newspaper. So those are the kinds of things we have. I wouldn't say we have a huge collection, but I would say we have enough of a collection that would be worth digitizing. Marlene and I did meet with UNK a couple of years ago when it was thought that we might be able to get the Henri archives here. But I think the family really wanted to go to Yale, which is where a lot of the other stuff is. But we looked at digitizing, and it was about $300,000 to do it, but we did consider it because we thought that was fundable. It all did wind up at Yale in 2022, so that we won't get.
Well, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I bet there's a lot of people in Cozad that don't know that the family was considering Cozad.
Yeah, the Leclerc family. John Leclerc married a Vivian, and then they were divorced, and somehow he carried on as the executor, and then he remarried to the woman who became Janet Leclerc Sr., if I can call her that. She became a scholar on Robert Henri and was well known in the art world because she made sure the paintings got to museums. And in fact, Janet Leclerc is the one who got us Queen Mariana. And she was great friends with someone here in Cozad, and that relationship blossomed to the point where we got that painting. The Leclercs still own about 20 of his paintings. They gave to Yale in 2022 all of Robert Henri's archives that were still left. It was 45 boxes worth. It included notebooks, his diaries, all but the one that we have here in Nebraska at the Sheldon. Tons of newspaper clippings, letters, things from both of his wives. So it was a pretty amazing collection they got. The one challenge with Yale is that, and maybe somebody there will be hearing this, but the challenge with Yale is it's hard to get into that collection. I mean, I've used presidential libraries and they're pretty hard to get into. You have to have a letter of reference from a scholar. You can't just rifle through FDR's papers. You have to say what you're looking for. But Yale is even harder than that. So, but we do have two scholars, one in particular, Judith Reeve, who does have access, and I'm sure that if we needed any information, she could get it for us. But we did try to get that collection. So I think what's going to happen, Andy Cozad, who I just mentioned, is going to either give or loan to us two sketches of Henri's. One is from both of them look like a Spanish origin. We just had a sketch by, excuse me, John Sloan donated to us. So I just think our focus ultimately, when this conversation is held 25 years from now, is going to be that we focus on his paintings and sketches, and Yale has the paper trail of Robert Henri's, I guess.
For everybody who might not know in the art world, Robert Henri's scrapbooks, if you will, they talk about even the colors that he used in paintings.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little on what you mean by scrapbooks?
So there are different things. So there's his notebooks, which are the listings of his paintings and his numbering system. So he numbered every painting after 1900. So that's listed. Then there's another set of notebooks that list all of his palette choices, his colors of each other. So for every year, he would pick X number of course, or part of the year, pick a certain number of colors. So in 1921, he had a color palette of about 20 different colors, reds, greens, pinks. In 1927, it was more reds and light reds and flesh tones. So those are another set of bound books or notebooks. And then he'll say, I painted Regine, which is our painting on this day, and these are the colors that I used. And then he'll have a little sketch of the painting next to it as well. So he was a great archivist in his own right. And then there's a third set of documents, and that is his diaries. And he kept a diary from 1879 until 1929 when he died. And as I said, the one that we have from 1880 is fascinating. It really is really interesting to read. And there are some names in there that you'll say, oh, I know somebody by that name here today. So that's kind of, and then it describes the life of what people were living here in Cozad, the ag life that they were living, or in his case, he'd also put in that book. He also would say, I've read this particular book. Then the fourth item are scrapbooks that he kept. And we have two of those scrapbooks from the 1870s. And they're fascinating because he was just clipping newspaper things like obituaries of people who died back in Cozad, or books that he had read, or things that he had, or people that he had read about, artists that he had read. And in a couple of our scrapbooks are illustrations that are hand colored and tinted. And I think Henri did that. That's just, I mean, I'm not an expert, but that's my guess. And that he has these pieces of these pages cut out and they're hand tinted. So those are the four basic, when we say notebooks, that's what they are. And then the other thing is all of his correspondence. I mean, there's thousands of letters. There's all these newspaper articles about his shows and things, exhibition catalogs. All of that is in this. It was 45 boxes. If you just can imagine a regular box, you know, an office file box, 45 of them. It's all inventoried. We have a copy of the inventory, and it was pretty amazing. In that inventory is even some stuff from Cozad, things that were land records or something like that. And I have a feeling that, at least from the Nebraska point of view, until they leave in 1884, they have that in that collection of things that people don't know what they have. They don't maybe know that these are land transactions from here. Now, we know that after 1884, because they left in such a hurry, didn't take anything with them, because they didn't want it shipped to a place where anybody could follow them getting out of here. We do know that some of that stuff was stored in the house here in Cozad, burned to the ground. It was a gateway home. And that, all those records, whatever they were burned. We also know that, and Mary Sandoz saw these, that there were some paintings that Henri had done as a boy that wound up, John Cozad gave them to someone, an employee or whatever. That cowboy took them up to the sandhills, and she had seen them, but didn't know what had ever happened to them. I mean, that would be great to find them. And of course, nobody, unless it was one of us from here, would know who Bob Cozad was, because that's how we would have signed the paintings, not Robert Henri. But they would be worth a great fortune to have those. We also have what we believe to be the first public, or the first painting of his on display in our collection right now. And that's controversial. I'd be the first to admit that. But if it is true, and all the provenance suggests that it could be true, but if that's true, we have the oldest Henri painting here. So, and the one before that that had been thought was disproved at some point. So,
how many paintings do you think there are that Henri has out there? And
so
versus sketches?
He painted 4,000 paintings. We know that when he died, his wife died a year after he did, so she wasn't around that long afterwards. But her sister destroyed about 500 of his paintings. And she did, you know, I look at it as being criminal that she would have done that, but she was doing it in part because she was, I think she was worried about the value of the remaining paintings. If there's 500 fewer paintings, that's 500 fewer paintings on the market. I also know that, in fairness to Viv, that we have a couple pages of his notebook records. And the irony of all this is that she would break them up and throw them into the same fireplace that Henri sat in front of or painted in front of, you know, to destroy these paintings. But in the cases of the several that I've seen, when it said destroyed, it had the date on it. But it would, like one of them is, it's the painting just before Normandy Farmhouse. And it says destroyed, paint was peeling off the canvas. So whatever had happened to that. So maybe there were more than just one that were in bad shape that she decided to get rid of. There is some suggestion that she may have even been anti-Semitic. This is Viv, not Robert Henri. And the reason that is, the argument for that, is that she painted Emma Goldman twice, and Emma Goldman was the great anarchist of the early 20th century, also Jewish, and Bernard Baruch, FDR's advisor, also Jewish, and she destroyed all three of those paintings. And it's in the records that she destroyed them. So I think it's a combination of things that happened, so.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, thank you for coming.
Mostly.
Good, good. So 4,000 is the number that we guess. He painted or sketched 900 items at Mohegan Island and about 400 at Apple Island. So right there is 1,300. And one of his sketches, we had somebody kind of inquired whether they could give it to us. It's a pastel sketch very similar to the one that we have. And she had it appraised last year for $26,000. And but he did hundreds of sketches up there. And how many sketches they do, it could be into the thousands, you know. One of the problems with the sketches, everything with Henri is like this. He dies, and there are hundreds of sketches in his studio, maybe even more than that. And it could have been your work as a student, could have been his work. He didn't usually sign his sketches. And so now there are hundreds of those, and immediately they're boxed up and sold as Henri's at the local commercial gallery in New York. And so what happens, and it happened when the Leclercs, the first generation of Leclercs were involved, they were all embossed with the RH, and then John C. Leclerc put 3 initials at the bottom of that embossing. But the problem is that a lot of these galleries are sold them as Henri's. And so when we had our conference a couple of years ago, the scholars were looking at them, they said, we think that these 10 or whatever are not Henri's, that they're somebody else. And you can imagine the students taking these, you know, handing them in for an assignment, and, you know, they're all sitting on his desk, and now there's hundreds of these things. So, but that's what I know there is to be. So. Anyway,
I've been hogging the questions.
no, not at all.
What is your view, your vision for the outdoor space
So
in the
this
back?
is the back side of the building. There's going to be a patio here, and then an overhang, or kind of an overhang there, and then I think 3 or 4 tables. So if you want to have lunch at the place at our place afterwards, or just want to sit outside, you can. There's this entrance, which is going to be a side entrance. I think we're hoping that most people will go all the way down the historical walkway and come into the front door here. And there's a service entrance over here. But as you can see, there are no windows. It's just on the front side there. And you won't be able to see the roof, as I mentioned before. This drawing is one that you have in your packet, and it's pretty close to what we're looking at doing. And then lastly, these are some of the ideas that we have for our building, these movable panels that are on wheels so that they can be turned, or we can do whatever with them. So that's what the inside will not have a ceiling. There'll be, I think they come out 8 feet panels, and then you're just looking up into all the HVAC work and everything, and that'll all be painted black. We're gonna have benches for people to sit on. And as I said before, we're going to try to divide this. We are going to divide it by geography, not a subject matter. So, and if you go to our website, you can get some pictures of it. And we even have, they call it a fly-through. You can click on that and actually go walk through the exhibit. So, does that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
How about lighting for the pictures? How is that going to be done?
So it's going to be hung from a ceiling, and they'll have decent, you know, something that comes down to hold it, and we'll adjust it from there.
The roll up, the rolling partitions?
Well, you know, we're designing those even as we speak. And so one of the things we've done is we're going to put plugs in the floor. And so when we build these, we're going to build them that they have electric in them already. So there might be plugs on the top here, and the wiring will come up, and then you can just plug it into the floor here if we need to light them. There's 4 layers of lights, 2 that come down the center of the building. Let's see, this isn't that much show. 2 that come down the center here, and then 1 on each side. It's a pretty expensive lighting system, what they spec'd out, and I don't know if that's going to be, you know, how that's going to. The museum is not building the building, Paulson Inc. is. And so they're going to have to make some of these calls based on, I'm sure pricing is certainly a part of it. And the design of the walls with the concrete and the styrofoam, that was designed by the architect, who is Wilkins from over in Kearney. And how's Larry related to Wilkins?
Mr. Wilkins' mother was Ike Paulson's sister.
Okay, so that's who they are. And Wilkins has done a lot of public buildings. I think they did the Carnegie Library, maybe the Elwood School. Yes, they're a pretty big time player. They're right there. I'm trying to think of what street that was that we were on. They're right across one of the big water towers there. It
Yeah,
would be the west.
39th
Yeah,
Street.
somewhere through there.
There.
But they really, and they designed the brochure that we gave you as well.
About fire protection, is that nitrogen?
I don't, so in some cases, they just said an allowance for a fire system. And it doesn't say, but they know, that is the architect and Paulson knows that we're gonna need that kind of system and not a water-based system. Yeah, so.
And insurance, how do they handle the insurance on the pictures?
So the building itself is one commercial liability policy, the walls, this all. The paintings themselves are under a different policy, and we have those right now, those policies in place, about $5,000 a year. And we have to, I'm just getting ready to do this now, we have to update our prices every year and also include any new sketches of paintings that we've gotten. So we have a separate, it's a marine policy that we have. I think it's XL is the name of the company. We get it through Arnold Insurance here in town. But that covers not only the paintings when they're here, but they're on loan somewhere or getting moved or whatever, so. And if we borrow paintings, like if we borrow those from the shelf, then we have to insure them from the moment they leave there until they go back.
And also, we have several entrances on this, what's to keep somebody from just walking in and pulling it in?
So I should say, Jess and I have an operational plan, and one of the things we're gonna do is this door, which is on the side, far eastern side, back corner, we're gonna keep it locked, actually, so that people can't come in through that door, and you're gonna have to come in through the front door. Yeah, because there's a service entrance here into the service room, the mechanical room, and then this one on the other, totally on the opposite side. But I think both of those will be locked. And another part of this is we plan for signage to come down the historical walkway. So if you should come to the museum first, which I think probably a lot of people will for the time being, you'll have to walk down that historical walkway and not come in through that side, but go around to the front of the building.
Will there be cameras?
I don't know. The security system is another thing where the architect spec'd out whatever. And I did notice in the bidding documents that there was a security company involved with. We use right now for our two buildings, ISS from over in Carnegie and Hastings. So, but there will be security, yes.
This concerns me, some of those pictures here are very expensive.
You don't know. No, Larry is very concerned because some of those are his. So yeah, there will be, I'm sure. Right now in our current gallery, there's 4 or 5 cameras. You come in through the front door, there's an alarm there. There's a fire alarm, smoke alarm system in there. So I'm sure this building will have that. We have really, Larry's company is the one who has dealt with some of the finer details of this. But we expressed what we thought we needed at the very beginning. And the security system was one, some kind of non-water fire alarm or fire extinguishing system. So, and the architect is an artist himself, and he's very wants to build the best possible building. So, yeah, I don't know how to explain it other than to say that we were not, or I should say, I was not involved with the intimate details of all this. I have the specs, the general specs, but Tim Dean up at Paulson is the one who's actually in charge of the project, and Shane Shoup, who's on the ground here. Those guys are the ones who are dealing with all this, and they've been working with us, absolutely. I was saying this week that I wanted to get into the building and have them paint the walls on the inside wall so I could see what our space would look like. And Shane said, I'll be glad to do that for you, but I'm not even thinking about it until Friday because I'm pouring concrete on Thursday and he has all this stuff to get ready for, actually tomorrow he's pouring. So, but they have been very good. And in fact, Shane is going to build sliding walls there or panels on wheels. So it's been great working with them. So. And of course, Paulson has built zillions of buildings with, you know, high tech, all that stuff. So, and Larry's gonna wanna be sure that, you know, his paintings are protected. And Queen Mary is worth a lot of money. And so, you know, we wanna be sure that everything is protected as well. And it's hard to explain to you, but we have 100-page that we're developing right now that not only has all the labels, but all these kinds of items like how do we keep the building secure? Well, one of the things is not to keep those doors locked, because you don't want people coming into that back entrance and you won't even see them because it's right by the restrooms. There's these exhibit panels that'll be up. So if you were sitting in the office there in the front, let's see here, if somebody came in through here, there's a panel right across there, and you wouldn't even see that person come in. So we're mindful of those kinds of issues. I appreciate you asking that. All right.
That is our time. An
Okay.
hour right on the dot.
You don't have to
So,
now.
thank you, Peter.
My
very much.
pleasure. Okay.
Again, if you haven't signed in, I ask you to do that, and please join us next month.